Good morning. You're listening to Central Wisconsin's 24-hour information station, AM 1320 WFHR. It's time now for the Morning Magazine, brought to you by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. Now, with the Morning Magazine, here's Carl Hilke.
Thank you, Jerry, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's show on AM 1320 and streaming live at WFHR.com, as well as we welcome our friend Jesse from Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. The reason he's here is because we are having our monthly update with Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink, and he's here for the entire hour, and we'll be taking your phone calls. But to show off for our TV audience, I'm wearing proudly my Wisconsin Rapids shirt. My nice. Market to celebrate the CVB's local on first shirt, which Pam gave me for Christmas, and then I got her an opal pendant from the same place. Nice. What are the odds, huh?
You're pretty generous, taking good care of Pam. That's good. She takes good care of you.
Yeah, she does. She does. But I thought it would be appropriate for the mayor's update to be to show off my city colors and my city pride.
To show off a new store that opened up downtown, and the neat part about it, I think, that I find if folks haven't been in there, is the fact that there's so much creativity and craft in our community that doesn't always get retail presence or a place for people to purchase it, because their products are small, or they wouldn't operate their own retail store on their own. So it's really a neat addition to downtown. It's nice to have that business in our community, and I wish them the most success. And I hope that if people haven't checked it out, that they do. It's co-located or cohabitated with the Karen's Wines and Steins, which is leased by the Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Visit Wisconsin Rapids Group, in the Mrs. Ham building downtown that's occupying the space next to Diva's salon in the Flatiron building.
Yeah, so it's real easy to find. So that's a nice segue into something that you had to do that you usually don't have to do, but you had to break a tie last night, and it has to do with marketing. It was the debate of allowing people to sell produce from their homes. And the debate on one hand said, come on, this is no different than a garage sale. And the other was, hold it, this is setting a dangerous precedent. We have places for them to, what's going to stop someone from selling this at their home and the like?
Right.
You decided to vote no. So explain your reason.
Well, it's funny, at the end of the council meeting, I don't know if you caught the very end of it, but Alderperson Furkey, who was against it on the Planning Commission, against it on the council floor, voted in favor accidentally. So it forced the tie. So he apologized to me and to the council. I didn't see the vote tally to see where everybody was.
So it was a mistaken tie.
It was a mistaken tiebreaker, which, he apologized, which it was kind of funny. But we certainly were aligned on it. So the issue came before the Planning Commission. Really, as you said, it's a question of whether or not, in this case, it was an individual wishing to sell pumpkins annually throughout the fall harvest season, and he sold them out of the front and side yard of his property. And the subject property we're talking about is on Baker and 14th Street. Baker being a very busy thoroughfare, narrower than generally our cross section of those streets that are busier with no street parking. So it was a case in point that there certainly are safety concerns that come as a result. So the point is, the requester wanted to see the city open up the sale of produce, agricultural produce in the city in residential districts. So presently, you can have a garage sale a couple of times a year for a few days, but you can't have a perpetual sale out of the front yard or the side yard of your property. And I believe for good reason. We have zoning districts set up that many residents have said to us, we have a residential neighborhood. We don't want to attract a lot of traffic or a lot of, especially, when you're talking about pumpkins or other products that may attract children, and if they're coming and going, crossing the street, coming between cars, residential districts are not set up to, not necessarily high, the safety visibility is not always there. And given the fact that we have farmers markets, we have produce, an allowance for produce stands to exist in commercial districts. Oftentimes people see them on 8th Street. There's at least 4 or 5 annually that operate every year throughout the summer and fall. And so ultimately the question came before the council. Planning Planning Commission said no originally back in, I believe, November, December. It came to the council. Council felt differently. They felt that there should be a allowance. At least some members, I should say, felt that the item should come back to the council with some revisions.
And some kind of ordinance that would allow this. And so last night there was the rewrite. And quite honestly, I was trying to follow that. I was.
Yeah, it's and we've checked with other communities, and primary to my reason was, if this is something that communities do offer generally, and we're just happen to be the anomaly or the unique situation where we don't offer it, I could see ourselves opening it up. But I think when you consider all of the variables and the concerns that can happen as a result of opening up people's residential lots for the commercial sale of products, no matter good intentioned or not, it's just not the most appropriate use of that property, considering the primary use is a residence. And I think the planning and the community development director said last night, what's to prevent then somebody wanting to sell their next product that they're producing at their home on the front yard? So it could be windmills as his example. It could really be anything, right? Sculptures. It really, from a property value and a neighborhood character, it isn't the most appropriate place for.
Well, that's why you have zoning. That's why you zone areas residential. Why you zone areas commercial.
Yes.
So might not this be a perfect example of why, with the Triangle Project, an indoor market be a good avenue for these people, for these folks who are creative and entrepreneurial, just like this market, Locals on First, or some other venue or venues that we could have in the city to encourage creativity and entrepreneurship and the like.
Well, it's very true, and that's actually a concept that's been pitched to the developer. Historically, the Rapids Mall has hosted a indoor winter market, and it's grown in popularity. I don't think it got to the point where it was wildly successful, but generally it offered space that these growers and producers aren't going to take up a retail space or a presence. It's too costly. The overhead's too high. So the idea would be that we would offer a flexible indoor market space that could change seasonally depending on maybe what's produced or grown. It doesn't even have to be agricultural products. It could be finished goods. It could be soups. It could be salads. It could be any food products that local even ethnic type of foods. I think it'd be a great opportunity to involve really a diverse group of people in our community to build community and social cohesion. That by offering a market that's available, it's cost effective, it's got lower overhead. People can be more successful in that environment. Plus, the community gets to sample goods and products that are not necessarily widely available throughout the community today.
Okay, so where are we at with that concept and the whole Triangle building project?
So we spent December discussing with some prospective tenants. Tenants came forward through various discussions we had in November and December, and have self-identified, saying, I'm interested in being an occupant in the retail or the commercial space of the building. We want to explore the idea more. What's going to be the cost to occupying the space, etc. So we spent some time in December discussing, and then now in January here, we've engaged our commercial. Our government finance folks to start putting together some starting point from a negotiation piece. That because the city owns the property, the city's going to have to come forward with some incentives, perhaps, to incentivize the retail space as well as the underground parking. So we've just begun to look at what the cost for the development might be and really what the gap in the development might exist. So we're in early stages with the discussions with our government finance folks. And then we're going to be putting forth discussion and dialogue with the developer to ultimately come up with a concept for that site.
Okay, now when that concept is developed, when would you anticipate or when would you like to see that come forward to the council? Because then the council has to give its thumbs up or thumbs down.
That's right.
And that if this doesn't work, then you got, I think it's like you've identified 3 other developers who are interested in the project if this one falls through. So what's the timeline? What kind of timelines are we looking at?
We're hoping that by March we'll have a draft developers agreement that sets forth what the developer is going to do in terms of what their investment will be, and then ultimately what will the city's investment be. And that might not be cash out of pocket. it. It could come in a couple of forms. It could come in the form of the real estate that we've acquired and packaged the real estate and prepared it for redevelopment. It could be cash in the case that we're going to have to put some underground parking in the development that might serve the surrounding downtown area, not just the development specifically. Currently the courthouse enjoys some parking across the Market Street in that triangle area. To the extent that we're going to look at the parking needs of those particular users and decide how much community parking might need to be included in the development. And that's going to come at a cost. But then there's the other incentive, and that's through the tax increment finance. So using a tax increment finance tool, the developer would pay taxes to the city. Those taxes could be rebated or used to pay off certain costs of the project. So there's a whole variety of ways. We haven't gotten into the details in negotiating with the developer yet. We really wanted to find out what's the demand look like in our market for various spaces in the building, the residential and the retail and commercial office. And the developer is well versed in the retail and the residential. That's really an area that they said, we have an understanding of your market. We know your market opportunity, but we don't really have a good handle on the retail or in the commercial office space, because our market has been fairly stagnant from a retail or from a commercial space. Our intention was to really bring locals into owning and occupying businesses and enterprise in the first floor in the retail space, because if we attract a national tenant or something, number one, it might be not feasible. Number two, those resources and profits don't stay in our community. So we really wanted to make sure that this building generated economic activity, not only in the downtown, but really in the community as a whole.
So it's true local economic development.
Exactly.
As a result of what you've heard so far, is your administration as well as the developer more upbeat or more confident about the fact that this is a viable project?
We're certainly confident, I guess, at the city, but I think we were quite skeptical, truly, what was the demand going to look like? Were there going to be individuals stepping forward and saying, I want to do a market and I want to bring this type of business downtown? We had thought maybe with anecdote that there was going to be interested people, but we didn't really quite understand who or how many of those people there might be. The developer left at the last meeting just a month ago, the middle of December the 14th, far more upbeat than we started the discussion. Originally, they were very skeptical of having any retail on the first floor. And given that it's downtown, we didn't want residential on the first floor. It's just not a fit. You want to have kind of a walkable setting where you've got some retail, even commercial offices, if it's not just a retail store on the first floor. And we ended up, from where we started to where we are now, with much more retail space on the first floor. Again, this is all very perspective and conceptual.
But it's evolutionary.
Absolutely. And to have individuals saying, you know what, I want to be downtown. That's where the energy is going to be. That's where the vibe is going to be in the community. These people are forward-looking business people, and they want to do what's best in the best interest of their business. So it was exciting to see that and have the developer, tell us that their discussions went well with the prospective tenants. We really want to honor that relationship and not involve too much the city, because frankly, we're not going to be providing incentives necessarily for the businesses to move or to set up shop, but we will do it through by way of the entire development as a whole.
But as I was talking last week on the show, when we were highlighting on the Visit Wisconsin Rapids segment, the shop, it has grown far faster than was anticipated. So obviously, there's a yearning to get downtown and for crafters and business folks and to have a venue, to have something. So yes. I would think that that's something we can really build on.
No question. And I think when I walked through the local on First retail space, number one, they struck a vibe that, a need in the community, as you just said. But I think it also, you think about like the cultural center, who now is in a temporary home that has property in the downtown and near downtown area on Jackson Street, Jackson and Saratoga, in the former Ebson's greenhouse space, that there is, again, talent and creativity in this community that if we can be in the business of producing and exporting products and uniqueness, that's going to create a vibe and obviously generate income and economic activity in our community and our downtown. So I think that's something that we've lost our edge, or we haven't maybe invested in ways. But I think for having local on First kind of take that first step and be a little bit risky and entrepreneurial themselves to really offer this space to the community and consigners and crafters is really neat. I mean, it's not my stigma in my mind was, very different than what's there today. When I walked in there and I couldn't believe the type of products that people in our community are producing. It's very neat.
I think it was like a test. It's almost like a test market. Now let's expand this idea even further going forward, and with the Triangle project, that could create an interesting dynamic in that neighborhood.
Right, especially when you think about inspiring others to maybe take the opportunity to be an entrepreneur. I mean, many people produce things that are unique. They don't take them to market. They don't take it to large-scale production. But I think this market will inspire others to do that. And I think the idea with the Triangle, we're exploring a concept where we would focus on craft beer. That there are a number of individuals and a group in the community that are producing craft beer. And for a community our size, not to have a fairly large-scale beer making operation is very unique, and I think it's has been a missed opportunity for our area.
And it goes against the history of this place, where we used to have multiple breweries on the river.
That's right, and I think that opportunity is coming around again. And I think between the Triangle development or even just other retail space, the city owns the East Town Plaza building, and just this week on Monday, a bunch of staff and I walked through the building to see. We've been spending on the days where we don't have a lot of fall or snow to push. Some of our public works staff are working through demolishing the interior of that building, the former Gritzmacher East Town Plaza building, which, if folks remember, it was very chopped up. There were almost ensuite, a small office and a restroom almost in every one of those suites. So essentially, we've cleared out the interior of the building, and we're going to be readying that for local developers in particular who have an interest in rehabbing that and bringing about new activity. It's a large space, so it could be occupied by a number of tenants, but that's going to be our first test to see what the demand will look like and ultimately what people want to see downtown.
Are you getting some interest in that?
We have. People have kind of driven by it from the exterior. It doesn't look any different than when the city bought it a little over a year ago, but now that we've looked inside of it, we're going to be hosting tours in February where people can walk through, prospective developers can walk through the building and truly see how much space is there. It's incredible how deep and how wide that building is. We had no idea when you stepped into it, when you were met with all these offices that were throughout, even the upstairs. We want to bring housing units to the upper floors, most likely apartments. Could be condos, I guess, too, where people could own the unit, but most likely they'll be apartments. And again, it's meeting an unmet need in our market for different housing and even different retail options.
And those kind of places or locations in downtowns create a certain energy, a certain vibe to the downtown. You go, oh, wow, that's really cool. That's really cool.
That's right.
People, especially with tourists, they look at that and go, wow, this is a really neat thing. That's why people like going to Stillwater, Minnesota, to go visit their downtown, to see these kind of things, or Hudson. I mean, it's that kind of, like you said, uniqueness, a unique development.
Yep. And I think our downtown has lacked the diversity in terms of what people want to see downtown, right? If you want a happy hour beer and you want a burger or you want, a lunch or dinner, you've got that need met, and with Jennings as a singular business, but, we want to have some more diverse options for people so that way, on a Saturday morning, for example, we didn't just roll up the sidewalks and there's no activity downtown, that there actually is people out and about, taking advantage of the public spaces along the riverfront and Veterans Park and others, as well as some of the commercial retail spaces throughout.
Okay, another thing, you were approving bids for the West Side Pumping Station replacement. Yeah. This is going to be a big project. Where are we in the planning for that?
Yeah, these are the types of things that our residents and people don't appreciate until something happens, right? So we're doing some proactive. So our West Side Lift Station, which is the building adjacent to the zoo, between the Armory and the zoo on Gaynor Avenue, that is well beyond its intended design life. It's been functioning fine, but at some point there's a question. Since the West Side Lift Station takes care of all of the wastewater from the west side of the river, we need to be planning for its replacement. So same goes for the river crossing. So it's in two-part. There's replacement of the West Side Lift Station. That's the essentially all the collection system of all the wastewater, both from industry such as ocean spray as well as all the residential waste. It gets collected. It meets at the West Side Lift Station by the zoo, and then it gets lifted across the river. And again, people don't see that infrastructure. It's there. The West Side, the river crossing has had some concern whether or not it's got some issues or will have some issues in the near future. So again, we're planning for its replacement. So we've got nearly a $4 million project with the force main, with the underground, with the river crossing. So it's going to cost nearly $4 million for the city to replace that infrastructure, and then $2.5 million for the West Side Lift Station project. The building that it was constructed in was in the 40s, and it's a really unique structure. Personally, I'm challenging city staff to find ways to retain it and use it potentially to benefit the zoo. It's a neat building. It's got some neat architecture. Built during an era in our country's history that I think people walk in it and there's a big plaque in there. Talk to the president at the time. It's a neat building, but those are two very large projects that will ensure our infrastructure doesn't meet failure. If there was an issue, it would be catastrophic if we had to pump, say, on a continual basis and tank or truck waste over the East Side wastewater treatment plant.
So better to take action now. We got our phone lines are open. It's a listening session, so our phone lines are open to 715-424-2600. We have our first caller, so let's get them on the air with you. You're on the Morning Magazine with Mayor Vruwink.
Yes, gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for this good show again. I'm needing to know, Mayor, if there is something in the paperwork for these tax credits that never gets out to our private sector builders. We have several that go to their financial, bankroll it on their own, and never ever hear about these tax credits. I'm thinking that we should be helping our people out here that actually are thinking of expanding the housing market or expanding retail versus going out of town and helping others. And listen off the air. And secondly, what or whom is in charge of finding a new placement for the farmers market? I would hope that it does not die. I would hope that it does not fall by the wayside for lack of interest, because it has interest and there's a definite need. And I thank you, gentlemen, and have a great day, and I'll listen off the air.
Thank you. Okay.
The caller brings up some really good points related to tax credits, and it's something that, frankly, before I held the position, I didn't have a good scan or read on what resources were available, especially when you're talking federal tax credit programs, which are generally complex. The rules are set up and they're known by those that play the game, so to speak, that are versed in the whole tax credit world. But I do think there's opportunity to hold some, I would say, like an informational session on what designations or designations our area has, and what programs might be available for local developers who generally, as the caller said, are putting their own cash on the line or banking their business here in town or at another financial institution, that this could be a tool for them to be more active in our community, especially when
is this something you could work with the Chamber of Commerce on?
I made myself a note as the caller was speaking, because I think that's it, is they have the members that are looking for new business or looking to invest here, but it's a matter of getting the word out on the tax credits, and they are, the city's not in a position to walk somebody through that. Generally, we're going to react to a developer that says, hey, we want to do this in your community, but I do think there's an opportunity for us to educate the local development community on what tax credit or what jurisdiction, what designations our jurisdiction has. New Markets tax credits, which is the one tax credit program the YMCA is vying for to fund a big portion of that project, not to mention the housing projects that we've talked about throughout the city.
You should mention the farmers market. Now, from what I understand, the folks with the Boys and Girls Club and the Y are interested in somehow working that as part of the development. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, it's a real concern. In fact, Monday morning we got a call from a vendor saying this is the time when generally the communication goes out about the market, and the vendors haven't heard anything. So I've got a note into the Y inquiring where their process is at in terms of communicating with the vendors. It is my understanding that the farmers market will remain in place at the existing site. We're talking about the Rapids Mall Farmers Market, not the Peach Street or the other YMCA one, but the one at the mall will remain for the foreseeable future in that existing site. There is some question though between construction staging and demolition and some of the other pieces. Might that not be the best spot for it at the moment? So I think we haven't settled that issue, but it is my understanding that the farmers market will remain in place. Previously, the mall manager had been the market manager, at least coordinated the activities there. So in terms of now that the Y owns the mall, I know they've retained the mall manager kind of for a period of time here to provide some stability and just a stopgap. But I do think the farmers market is something I do hear a bit about. I mean, as a user myself, we need to retain that asset in the downtown area. A lot of vendors have said we want to stay on the west side. There's a question I think people really want, some vendors really want the visibility of the expressway. I question whether or not that visibility matters, especially when you've got so many employees now in the river block or at the courthouse or at City Hall or in the Schreiber building that will walk over to the market. So it really could be anywhere as long as it's walkable and accessible. And frankly, the parking lot hasn't been the safest place for it. I know a lot of people have complained that if you're a pedestrian or you're carrying product to your car, you know, the lack of layout really with the mall parking lot previously was really just a chaotic situation.
Okay, so are we maybe looking at a temporary home this summer?
Well, we've been led to believe that the market will stay in its existing footprint. The question is that realistic or is that feasible? And we haven't closed the loop on that. But our understanding is, yes, it's staying at where it is.
Okay.
But there's folks that have said, you know, it needs a structure. We held a farmers market discussion late October talking about with the vendors and other community members, what do people want to see in their market? And a lot of people had said we want a permanent structure so that way on maybe inclement weather days, the vendors can still operate and the patrons can still use it without having to be out in the elements. So it would be kind of a half open air structure. Where that would be, I don't know. You know, personally, it'd be neat to have it closer to the river and along the river, but you know, we'd have to explore the feasibility of all those pieces.
Okay, with that, we have to take our first break. You're listening to The Morning Magazine and our monthly visit with Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink. If you have questions or comments, the phone line is 715-424-2600. Back with more right after this.
Good morning and welcome back to The Morning Magazine, presented by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. It's time for part 2. Once again, here's Carl Hilke.
Thanks again, and welcome back, everybody, to today's show on AM 1320 and streaming live at WFHR.com. We also welcome Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. You can view this program on your local cable system or on their website in high definition. Jesse's showing you why I have a face for radio. Okay.
You did show your front side.
Yes, I did. I wore it proud. I wore it proud.
Form for you.
Yeah. We're doing our monthly visit with Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink, and last night you introduced or talked about the city's new human resources director.
Mm-hmm. Our long appointed or long-standing HR director took another opportunity last summer, and so we took some time to analyze the position and decide kind of what we really wanted that position to be in terms of service to the city and to the employees. And so last night, after an extensive search and screening process, I presented Dawn Urban, who's a City of Marshfield resident, currently employed by Marshfield Clinic Information Systems. That's the IT arm for Marshfield Clinic System, who develops all their software for their electronic medical records and such. She is now going to be the city's HR director effective next Monday, and so we're looking forward to having a new person in that position, new energy, new ideas and approaches to things. She comes to us with a business administration degree and a human resources certificate and certification. So I'm very excited to have have her joining the city's administrative team.
Are there any changes you'd like to see in that department?
Well, we've long felt that our city administration, both finance and HR, could be much more modern in terms of how we approach things. The city, not all that different than probably some businesses. We still use a very low-tech or no-tech payroll system, not so much for the processing payroll, but just how we're timekeeping. Everyone keeps their time on paper timesheets, and believe me, when I was elected 5.5 years ago, I was very shocked by that everyone's timesheets come over to the city hall manually. There isn't a system where people are punching in and out, so it's that type of thing that we really want to modernize. We know that you reduce errors and just the amount of time it takes to process things when you're not having to put it on paper, enter it off of paper, etc. And the same goes from a recruitment standpoint. If we've got job openings, our process today isn't the most streamlined for people to apply for jobs with the city. So there's that external function that we want to be a bit more modern. And frankly, if an employee is coming to Wisconsin Rapids, maybe their spouse got a job here, they're looking at the community, and their experience looking for jobs or applying for jobs with the city as an entity isn't the most fun, they're going to question what else is it like to work for the city. So it's that kind of putting the best foot forward in that regard. So really modernizing the department, really helping interfaces, really bridging disconnect and a divide between finance and HR and other departments. Because if you're operating in a low-tech fashion, access to information, if you're an employee, if you're looking for your pay history and time off and those sorts of things, it's all done manually. And so it's not a point of pride for the city at this stage. We've had a lot of new hires and turnover in those departments. So really the timing is perfect for a new HR director to come in, a finance director to work together to bring about a new financial system. And so for many of our listeners, that's boring and doesn't matter to them.
But it's efficient use of our tax dollars.
Absolutely. And we believe that our director's time, our manager's time should be better spent, less pushing paper and managing the whole systems, but to really help leading change. And so we believe by them being able to free up some of their time, even, I don't care what manager, if they're leader of the fire or the police departments or any public works departments, just having more time will allow us to accomplish more from a city perspective.
And then you'll improve also interdepartmental communications when you upgrade these systems.
That's right. I believe the relationships are there. We've worked hard at fostering open communication among and across departments, but until you have the software and at least the tech systems that connect each other, it's very difficult, even from managing to a budget. Right now, if you want to see how much your budget you've spent to date in your budget, it's not as user-friendly of a process. So it's hard to expect managers to really manage to a tight budget and manage that appropriately if they don't have access to the information. So everyone realizes that we need this new change and to bring about the change, but it's going to take the implementation of a new system. The communities that have done it, sometimes they take as long as a year. So it's a daunting task, I think, but everyone's finally on board and they believe that this is the right thing to do, and it's just going to take some time to get there.
Yeah, I think when you're been dealing with a dinosaur, you're not worried about the length of time it takes to get rid of the dinosaur. This is get rid of the dinosaur.
Exactly. Right.
Okay.
You got it.
And with that, you also talked about during your report to the council last night about an upgrade of the city's website and making it more user-friendly, et cetera, especially as it relates to things like smartphones, et cetera. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the world has evolved in the sense that residents want access to information on their own terms, and they don't want to have to make a call or show up to City Hall. And our website presence has been lacking before my time, and it's something we've wanted to address. But again, it's another daunting task when you talk about 13 departments and all the information they have and trying to migrate it to a new platform. We've been working really hard with our IT director to really put forth a plan on how we're going to implement this thing. And so about a little over a year into that project, and we're getting close. We've got some draft designs, and now we're working with departments on what information we're going to move over to the new website. A new feature, though, that will launch before the website is an refreshed smartphone app. So people will be able to go on their smartphone and search for Wisconsin Rapids, and they'll have a smartphone app that'll take them to a variety of things. If they want to pay their fines or pay their taxes online, they can do so via their smartphone as opposed to sitting down at a desktop computer, which some people are doing away with now today as well. So we believe that's going to just, again, modernize the perspective and the view that people have of our city.
Okay, we got a caller, and before I get to my next topic, let's get to our caller. And good morning, you're on the Morning Magazine with Mayor Vruwink.
Good morning. I have a couple of questions for the mayor. A couple of things that we have lost recently in the last year or two, and most recently our bookstore in downtown with Book World closing, and then also a bakery. I know we have one out on 8th Street, but typically where Grimler's was at. Both of those, I've heard a lot of people say, oh, we've lost those. What's going to happen? So I thought I'd just share that with to see what Mayor Vruwink has to say about that.
Okay, well, good. I remember, Gremler's, I think it was basically the family decided to retire.
That's right.
Got out of
Yes.
it.
Yes, and I did know them personally, and when they retired, I thought, well, maybe someone would come in and buy that little shop because I used it a lot, and it's very tasty, kind of like home cooking, home baking, I should say. But anyway, I'll listen to both of those issues off the line.
Okay, well, thank you for your questions.
Yes, and thank you very much, Mayor and Carl. Appreciate everything you do.
Okay, very welcome. Yeah, let's talk about that. Those are, iconic things. Obviously, for folks that don't know, Book World shut all their shops across the area and the country, for that matter. And we have something where you have a popular, locally owned shop at that location. What can we do to try and incentivize somebody who's a baker to come there?
Yeah, I think the two issues really on the bookstore. The bookstores service such a variety of customers. From the daily person that wants to buy the newspaper to somebody that's looking for a gift, and obviously readers. Kind of all in the same space. I've seen in other communities where kind of a local coffee shop has picked up various elements of what a bookstore is. The reality of the world is I don't think we can support. Communities can't support a bookstore in the former form, and I think that's why Book World, from a model, it just wasn't relevant anymore.
Well, they claimed
the smartphone.
The smartphones and online.
And I point to Amazon, right? Amazon is, probably not in the most positive fashion revolutionized the world, and that's the reason why they're so successful is because the consumers have chosen them over others. And not to say that everyone is going to be an Amazon customer, they're not. But I do think that there is still opportunity for somebody to meet the need in our market that Book World met, and it's an unmet need today, right? In the same vein, when we had sporting goods met for a very short while with MC Sports, that there are certain retail products that people are asking for in our community. And frankly, our approach at the city is not to bring in a national retailer. It's great to have them in our market, but frankly, they don't stay long, and those profits don't stay in our community. And so we'd very much like the entrepreneur to step up and to really have the community's confidence behind them, and that takes me to the bakery piece. I firmly agree, and I'll tell you, there's not one business that probably tops the list more than I get requests for even a bakery or a deli or a place for people to get a soup and a sandwich for lunch or even a light breakfast. So I would say that those are certainly on the top of our list. Again, it's going to come down to somebody having the confidence. The city is available. Those types of business aren't necessarily the most profitable, and they're very labor intensive. As the caller said, she knows the Grumler family that they really put a lot of blood and sweat and over the years in that business, and it's not easy. So we know that, and at the city we do have a few programs available, low interest loans and others that maybe banks aren't traditionally financing a bakery startup, again because they're not as profitable as other types of businesses. So we very much would be interested in hearing from folks that do want to start that in our community.
Here's me being crazy Carl again and thinking outside the box. We got locals on First. There might be some baker or small bakery that may be selling on consignment maybe something there. I don't know if that it is, or maybe we can find out just how interested they are and provide here. These are programs, credits, loans that could, and we got this spot here. Would you be interested in a storefront, because there's a customer base that's hungry for this?
That's right. And especially now that some of the storefronts downtown have gotten refaced, right? They've got a new front on them and new energy. And I think whether it's the building next to Paul Gross Jewelers or the one on the west, I mean, there's buildings downtown that people that are vacant, right? That are ready to go. And I think those property owners generally would cut somebody a deal to get occupants.
I know Family Natural Foods is doing a lot with local foods as well.
That's a good mention, because those folks, whether it's soups for lunch or salads, I know they've got both there now, and it's a nice little outlet. But people don't traditionally think of them as a food service, but more as a product.
Okay, before we go to our next break, let's let this caller talk to you. You're on the air.
Good morning.
Good morning, Al. What do you got?
I'd like to ask the mayor if he knows when the Dunkin' Donuts coming to town.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Heard about something about that a few days ago. Somebody told me.
Yes.
Okay. Good question, Al. Well,
okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for the call. I know it's another one. I mean, they fulfill somewhat of a bakery need.
Well, yeah,
right?
and there was that announcement that they were going to be coming. So what's the status?
Well, they do have a site plan and a location picked out, which is across from McDonald's in the parking lot between Pizza Hut and Kelly's Liquor and some of the other strip mall in front of the former county market parking lot, I guess, as I remember. So that is a location. The corporate is looking at the site plan, and we understood that they were going to be pulling permits to break ground here this winter yet.
Okay. With that, we'll take our next break. You're listening to The Morning Magazine. Welcome back to the final segment of the Morning Magazine with Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink. You're on AM 1320 WFHR and WFHR.com and Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. And with that, let's get to our next caller who's patiently waiting. Thanks for waiting, and it's your turn.
Hi, I was wondering about when they talked about, don't they say they'd like to do stuff like on the west side, with the farmers market? Yeah. Okay, what about a temporary, not temporary, but a sort of a lean-to / band shelter in that great big parking lot that was cleared all out for, mill offices?
Are you talking about the one that the Mead Witter Foundation cleared out? Across from the county building?
Yeah, is that the one by the old Tribune building? Also?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's the Mead Witter Foundation cleared that out.
What about I can't cost that much.
Okay, well, here, why don't we explain this, because the city doesn't own that. That's the Mead Witter properties. And so why don't we let the mayor answer your question? But, okay, there again, there's a perception problem here. There's some stuff getting torn down and everything else, and everybody thinks the city is involved with it.
Right.
And the Mead Witter Foundation's been doing a whole bunch of tearing down and no rebuilding, and nobody's hearing anything about what their plans are.
That's right. And I think, I've had some discussion with those folks about what their plans are and what their vision is for property. And I think the caller brings up a good point that I've shared and others have shared with me, that they'd like to see something get developed in there that maybe balances the desire to have a open space along the river and view of the river, while also offering some community utility. And I think the caller was raising a point about maybe a performance stage or something where you could have events, and tie in the farmers market or other things. I think the Phoenix Park project in downtown Eau Claire, near the confluence of the Eau Claire and the Chippewa River, really is a neat example of this. That they've got, it's really a community activity hub that and so having a lot of residents have come to me saying, why aren't you doing it, or what are you doing with that parking lot? Again, thank you, Carl. The city doesn't own it. We don't control what happens with the property entirely, but certainly we can share with them what I'm hearing and what the other community members are saying about what they'd like to see in that property.
Is there something at a minimum that the city could say, at least clean it up?
Yeah, I think it's been in stages, right? They tore the asphalt out last fall or late last summer, and I don't have a schedule to share because I'm not familiar with what their exact plans are for the site, but that's certainly something residents could call the Mead Witter Foundation directly to and share their thoughts about what they'd like to see the property become. Okay.
Well, let's skip right back to our next caller. You're on the air. Good morning.
Good morning. I have a question for Mr. Vruwink. I know that they're considering a new aquatic center in the area, and I would like to know why they're not having a more or less conventional educational pool and talking about a splash pad every child in this town lives within a quarter mile or less of viable water that they could go swim in or fall into or drown or whatever.
Right.
And yet we don't have a pool other than Lincoln High School at the moment where a child can be drown-proofed. What is the city's opinion on that, and why?
Okay, let's get an answer for your question.
Well, and the caller brings up a good point. I think that's really the baseline reason why the city is building a pool or an aquatics facility is that we still have an obligation to teach and provide swim education, right? And whether it's because we are a river community or just the fact that we can avoid deaths in swimming accidents by teaching kids at a basic level and in a very affordable fashion. I think the city's swim lessons have been and will always be the cheapest and most affordable for students or for youth and students to take classes in. And so the reason why we did the splash pad in the former Mead Pool site was we needed to get some aquatic amenity, outdoor recreational play available to the community in a very short fashion. So that was a quick project this last summer and it opened late in the fall. But the caller does raise a very important point. I think that's why the city council and I've concurred that we still need a swimming pool facility that will educate students.
Okay, why don't we do a quick update on that project?
So
because we're quickly running out of time.
Sure. Well,
got one more color that I would like to get in.
I think maybe the other point the caller was making regarding conventional pools, the reality is conventional pools, like we've known them, aren't being constructed anymore because they just don't have the life expectancy and the cost to operate them is not affordable. So that's why the city opted for a bit larger scale, one that would serve more of our region as opposed to just a neighborhood or a portion of the city's resident population. And so that's why the price tag is $10 million versus maybe $7 million. But the reality is what you get for 7 versus 10 is quite a difference. By just paring back a pool out of the project doesn't save millions. It saves a couple $100,000 or maybe $1 million, but it doesn't, the infrastructure is just an overhead cost to the entire infrastructure. But the caller raises a very valid point, and that's why we're still pressing forward. We've got $5.5 million from the city that's committed. We're still in the fundraising phase for $4.5 to $5 million.
How much has been raised so far?
5.5 of the what cities contributed. We have not secured a lead gift of any substantial proportion that would allow us to break ground. And so come March 1st, if we have any sum of money close to the $10 million, we will break ground. If not, we're going to have to look at a different construction schedule and prolong our fundraising efforts.
Okay, before we have to say bye-bye, let's call her on the air. Good morning, your question.
Good morning. What's the city doing on trying to get some industry back into this town? I grew up here, and God, we had places we could go and do some good work, and you don't have anything here anymore.
Well, okay.
Well, it's a big question with a long answer.
Yeah, and I disagree. We don't have anything here anymore. The industry has changed, but
the industry has changed, and I think the substitution hasn't been to the caller's expectations related to wages. And I would agree that we don't have the job growth and job development in this community with the wages that were paid maybe by the pulp and paper industry here. And the downturn has really left this community, to really fester for a long time economically. And it's a major concern, but at the same time, if we don't have the employment base and the educational attainment or the skill set, employers aren't going to create jobs here. And I just attended a presentation this morning with a UWSP economist who was talking about why is this economy in the Wisconsin Rapids lagging the rest of the state's recovery. And granted, there's a ton of information to unpack in that point, but the reality is we just haven't had the replacement of job growth and retention. So in the caller's question or expectation that the city do that and be successful at that is a lofty expectation. And I certainly take that on myself and see myself playing a role in that. But the reality is trying to attract industry to grow in a community when industry generally is leaner. It doesn't employ as many people as it used to. The wages are generally less unless there's an educational component. And the reality is our community has about 10% of its people with an educational degree beyond a high school diploma. So employers are looking for educated workforce. They're looking for a skilled workforce. And while we have we have a very skilled workforce, we don't have the skills that high wage employers are looking for.
And that's what the Regional Economic Growth Initiative has been working on. Mid-State Technical College has been working on. We have to get the upgrade our skill set in order to attract the companies that are providing the new jobs.
That's right. And really just doing a better job of attracting and retaining young adults and young families. So part of the caller's point is if we don't have facilities like an aquatic center, if we don't have facilities like a great library or a technical college, we're not going to attract and retain families here. So you can't just say we want to bring business to this community, not have anything for them to do, because frankly, residents are choosing where to live first, not where to work, and then where to live. So it's a different paradigm. It's very different than what it was decades ago when we wanted to bring business to a community and people just came with it. No, people are choosing where to live first, and then they're looking for work.
Okay, good point. Well, with that, thank you all to all the callers. Thank you to Wisconsin Rapids Community Media for being here. Thank you, Your Honor, for an interesting hour, and we'll do it again next month.
All right, very good. Thanks to all of our callers.
And with that, we'll wrap up the Morning Magazine.